Welcome to a place where stories breathe softly, where the weight of the day dissolves into gentle narrative, and where sleep finds you through the comfort of words. Before we begin tonight's journey, I'd love to know, what brought you here tonight? Are you seeking rest after a difficult day, or perhaps comfort from a restless mind? Share your thoughts in the comments below. There's something beautiful about knowing we're all here together, scattered across the world, yet united in this moment of seeking peace. Now settle yourself. Let your bodies sink deeper into whatever surface holds you. Close your eyes or let them grow heavy. Take one slow breath and another. Allow my voice to become a river that carries you gently toward sleep, toward a story that lives in the space between memory and dream. The package arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late December, delivered by a postal worker who apologized for its lateness. Something about storms delaying routes in the Northern Territories. Margaret Holloway accepted it at her door with mittened hands, noting immediately the unfamiliar handwriting on the brown paper wrapping. The address was correct, her small apartment above the bookshop on Ashwood Street. But the sender's name made her breath catch. Corporal James Holloway, somewhere in France, 1918. Her brother, who had died 23 years ago. She stood in the doorway, snow beginning to settle on her shoulders, on the package itself, while the postal worker waited for acknowledgement that never quite came. Eventually, he tipped his cap and trudged back through the accumulating drifts, leaving Margaret alone with the impossible thing in her hands. The package was not large, perhaps the size of a hardcover book, wrapped carefully, tied with string that had weathered decades. She turned it over slowly, examining the postal marks, the stamps that spoke of a journey interrupted, resumed, lost, and found again through channels she couldn't fathom. Inside her apartment, modest, warm, filled with books, and the particular silence of someone who had learned to live alone, Margaret set the package on her small kitchen table. She made tea, not because she wanted it, but because the ritual gave her hands something to do while her mind tried to comprehend what sat before her. James had been 19 when he died. She had been 14. The telegram had arrived on a morning much like this one. Gray sky, falling snow, the world muffled and quiet, as though even nature understood the need for gentleness when delivering unbearable news. For 23 years, Margaret had carried her brother's absence like a stone in her chest. She had grown into womanhood without him. She had become a bookshop clerk, inherited the shop when old Mr. Pemberton passed, built a life that was small but sufficient. And through it all, James remained 19, forever smiling in the photograph on her mantel, forever writing letters that had arrived for months after his death, each one a knife to the heart, until the letters stopped, and now, impossibly, here was one more. Margaret's hands trembled as she cut the string. The brown paper fell away, revealing a wooden box, military issue, plain but sturdy. Inside, cushioned by what looked like an old uniform jacket, was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it slowly. A letter, pages and pages covered in her brother's familiar handwriting, careful, deliberate, the writing of someone who knew words mattered. Beneath the letter, a small leather journal, and tucked between its pages, a pressed flower, a poppy. Margaret lifted the letter with both hands, as though it were something sacred or fragile or both. The first page bore a date, November 10th, 1918. One day before the armistice, one day before the war ended, one day before James died. The letter. My dearest Meg, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and this letter has found its way home through means I arranged before we went over the top. I'm writing this in a trench that smells of mud and smoke and things I won't describe, because you don't need those images in your mind. It's cold tonight, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and makes you wonder if you'll ever be warm again. But I've found that if I close my eyes and think hard enough, I can remember summer afternoons in our garden. Do you remember, Meg, when we were children and we'd lie in the grass watching clouds, making up stories about where they were traveling? I think about that a lot now, about clouds and stories and home. There's a man in my unit named Thomas Brennan. He's from somewhere north, Scotland, I think, though his accent is soft from years elsewhere. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's worth listening to. Tonight, while we were on watch, he told me about his father, about how they'd argued before he enlisted, how they hadn't spoken since, how he carried that silence like a wound that wouldn't heal. I told him he should write a letter, that words matter even when they're difficult, especially when they're difficult. He asked me if I'd written such letters. I told him yes. I told him I write to you every chance I get, that you're the reason I remember who I am beneath this uniform, beneath this mud, beneath everything the war tries to make us become. But I realized, Meg, that I haven't said the things that truly matter, the things that seem too large or too tender to fit into ordinary letters. So I'm writing them now in case I don't get another chance. Margaret paused, her vision blurring. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered street, at the warm lights in windows across the way, at the evening settling into night. Her tea had gone cold. The apartment was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel and her own uneven breathing. She returned to the table and continued reading. I want you to know that you were my favorite person in the world. That's not something brothers usually say to sisters, I suppose. We're meant to tease and argue and act like we don't care. But I'm done pretending. You are my favorite person. I loved how you'd hide books under your pillow and read by candlelight long after Mother told you to sleep. I loved how you'd make up elaborate stories about the people we'd pass on the street,
giving them names and histories and secret dreams. I loved how you cried at sad endings and laughed at bad jokes and believed, truly believed, that the world was more good than bad. I hope you still believe that, Meg, even with me gone, even with whatever else life has brought you in the years since I've been away. I hope you've read 1,000 books. I hope you've laughed until your sides hurt. I hope you found people who see you the way I see you, as someone extraordinary wearing ordinary clothes. I hope you've forgiven yourself for whatever guilt you might carry. Sisters sometimes think they could have prevented their brothers from enlisting, could have said words that would have kept them home. You couldn't have. This was my choice, and while I won't pretend I don't wish I'd made a different one, I also won't burden you with responsibility for it.
Thomas Brennan asked me tonight what I'd want someone to know if I died tomorrow. I didn't have to think long. I'd want you to know that loving you, being your brother, was the best thing I ever did. That every good part of me came from our childhood, from our family, from you. I'd want you to know that when I'm afraid, and I am afraid, Meg, more often than I'd admit to anyone else, I think about home. I think about you, and it helps. I'd want you to know that if I don't make it back, you should live enough for both of us. Read the books I'll never read. See the places I'll never see. Love someone the way I would have wanted to love someone. Don't let my absence make your world smaller. Make it bigger, Meg. Make it so big that there's room for my memory without it crushing everything else. The letter went on for several more pages. Memories, jokes they'd shared, observations about life and war and humanity that showed a young man trying to make sense of impossible circumstances. Margaret read it all, tears streaming freely now, not bothering to wipe them away. At the end, James had written, "I'm enclosing a journal. I've been writing in it. Nothing profound, just daily thoughts, descriptions of the men I serve with, the things we talk about when we're trying not to think about tomorrow. I want you to have it, not because it's important, but because it's true, because in some small way it keeps me alive beyond whatever happens next. Take care of yourself, little sister. Take care of mother and father if they're still..." The sentence ended abruptly, unfinished, as though he'd been called away mid-thought or couldn't bear to finish the sentiment. The final line simply read, "All my love, always and always, James." Margaret sat at her table as evening deepened into night. The snow continued falling outside, blanketing the world in silence. She didn't move to turn on more lights. The single lamp beside her was enough. She opened the journal with careful reverence. The first entry was dated June 1918, 6 months of her brother's life preserved in ink and paper. She began reading, and as she read, James came alive again. Not the frozen 19-year-old of memory,
but a living, breathing person. She read about his friends, Thomas Brennan, who never smiled but had the kindest eyes, Michael something or other, who sang Irish songs and couldn't carry a tune, a young officer named Lieutenant Ashford, who read poetry aloud when he thought no one was listening. She read about the absurd and the terrible, often sitting side by side, a rat that became a company mascot, a game of football played in a crater, letters from home that made grown men weep, the particular quality of silence before battle, the way they'd learned to find beauty in impossible places, a wildflower growing in rubble, the colors of dawn even after the worst nights. She read her brother's evolving thoughts about courage and fear, about duty and waste, about the men he served with and loved in the way soldiers love each other, forged by shared impossible circumstances. And she read about herself. December 3rd, 1918. Got Meg's letter today. She's worried I'm not eating enough. Made me laugh. Even in war, she's trying to mother me. I miss her something fierce. I think when I get home, I'll tell her that. I think I'll tell her a lot of things I've left unsaid. Margaret touched the page gently, as though she could reach through time to that moment, to tell him she missed him too, that she'd worried every day, that his letters had been the thread keeping her tethered through impossible years. The clock struck midnight. Margaret lifted her head, surprised to find so much time had passed. Her small apartment felt different now, less empty somehow, as though James had been sitting with her while she read, keeping her company across the barrier between worlds. She closed the journal carefully and placed it beside the letter. Tomorrow she would read more. Tomorrow she would begin to integrate this gift into her understanding of the past. But tonight, she simply sat with it, with him, with the strange mercy of receiving one final message from someone she'd thought lost forever. Outside, the snow fell steady and gentle. Inside, Margaret Holloway cried and smiled and grieved and healed all at once, in the way that only the human heart can manage. And somewhere in the space between memory and presence, James seemed very close, as though saying, "I'm here, Meg. I've always been here, and I always will be." The story of Margaret and James doesn't end here, though our time together tonight must. Some stories don't have neat endings. They simply continue, woven into the fabric of those who carry them forward. As you drift toward sleep, consider the letters you carry, written or unwritten, the words you've received that changed you, the words you've yet to speak, the people who live on in your memory, shaping who you are long after they've gone. Rest now. Let this story settle gently over you like the snow over Margaret's street, soft, covering everything with peace. Tomorrow will come with its demands and noise, but tonight belongs to quiet things, to gentleness, to rest. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Before you sleep, would you leave a comment sharing one person you're grateful for tonight? It doesn't have to be elaborate, just a name, a memory, a feeling. Let's create a constellation of gratitude together. Sleep well, dear listener. Until we meet again in another story, another night, another journey toward rest.